So I need your help today. Stick around with me in this video and I'll talk you through some of the plants that I am struggling to keep happy or / do not know how to care for. Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So today's video is going to be a bit different. I thought a lot of the times people might come to me for advice in terms of how to grow their plants because people assume that I have a lot of knowledge for a lot of the different plants. I do kind of for the plants that I own, but again kind of not. And this is where this video comes into play. I thought, let's try something different, because I've got plants that I do not know how to care for. I've tried things over the years, I can talk you through some of that, but I want to encourage you because my audience, as I have found out over the years, is exceptionally knowledgeable in a lot of things to do with houseplants. Even the people that don't think they've got knowledge, they actually really do. So I want to talk you through a few plants, some that are new to me, some that I haven't grown before, some that I've been trying to grow for a while without a great deal of success, and open up the forum for you all to comment down below what you do in order to keep your plants happy. Because a lot of the times I've found that some plants that don't do particularly well with me do particularly well with a lot of you. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of the plants. So the first plant I want to talk about is the one that I recently did an unboxing video, and I will link it at the top. And this is the Aralia Ming. Oh, this is so pretty. Ooh. But as I mentioned in that original video, I have never grown an Aralia. Technically, these are not true Aralias, as I found out. This is a Polyscias Ming. Sorry, I did mention Aralia to begin with, but a lot of people within the industry might still call these Aralias. Don't ask me why that happened. Things like this happened. Yay, planty world. But this is a plant, as I mentioned, that I haven't necessarily grown before. I do have one other plant that is arriving, hopefully this week, which is a plant that I have been looking for over 7 years, and it doesn't come up very often in the UK. And I think it is closely related to Polyscias or true Aralias. I wasn't able to kind of figure that little bit out. So any bit of advice would be great, because that plant was not cheap, but yeah, it's a plant that I've been wanting for a very, very long period of time, and it doesn't ever come up in the UK or Europe generally for sale very often, if at all, basically. So as soon as I saw it, I'm just like, purchase and done. It's not going to be a big enough kind of order for, so there's two plants. It's not going to be a big enough order for me to do an unboxing video, but I will probably film the unboxing and attach it to one of the videos next week, basically. But yeah, so anything you know about a kind of Polyscias would be great, especially if you've ever grown specifically the Polyscias Ming or any of the other Polyscias that you've got. So from what I can see online, from the research that I've done, a lot of people are just like, it likes a lot of humidity. It's the same kind of thing that they say about a lot of the houseplants. So it likes a lot of humidity. You need to let the soil dry out. First question here is, if you do own this, am I letting this fully dry out like I would with a succulent? Or am I letting the kind of top layers of soil dry out and then water, basically? I have kept this plant in the grower's media because I didn't want to stress it out, because I think that these can be a bit temperamental at times. As I said in that original video, I did not place this in bright direct light. I have placed this in my bathroom, so it does get a decent level of humidity, not the same level of humidity as in here, but it also gets bright indirect light. So, question on the light. Is it true what people are saying, that it needs bright indirect light? Does it need less? Does it need more? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll bring up the plant so you can kind of see it again, because it is so pretty. Oh, so pretty. But yeah, and I think that's the big thing on this one. Let me know any tips that you might have on fertilizing. This would apply to most of the plants that I'm going to talk about, but some of them I've got specific problems with, so that's kind of what I'm asking for help with, basically. as I said, I've done my own research for most of these plants. Some of them, you'll see in a minute, I have grown for a while. Not very successfully, but I am trying. And yeah, just let me know kind of anything that you think is pertinent for this plant, especially if you know that it is very kind of attractive to a certain type of pest and all of these things, let me know. The next one is going to be tricky for me to move out, so I will place a picture or a video here. And this is my Philodendron gigas. I think I've even done a review video. If I have, I'll add it at the top. But obviously bear in mind that that is tainted to a certain point with the struggles that I have had growing this plant. And I think, I'm not going to say specifically looking at most of my Australian audience for this, but I know from previous videos when I've mentioned it and I've mentioned the struggles that I've had with it, a lot of people from Australia had a few things to say because their ones are like huge and glamorous and very, very cool basically. But I know from a recent video when I kind of made that comment, people were just like, no, but we grow it quite well and we're not based in Australia, so booey, and that is a fantastic because it means that I might stand a chance in hell that I can grow it happily, basically. I'm pointing that way because the plant is actually on the shelf with all of my epipremnums, basically. And if you want to know kind of how the conservatory is set up, I have done a video when I kind of set it all up, and I will link it somewhere at the top as well. But yeah, this is a plant that I still struggle with. It's been a few years. Might be coming up to 5 years at the moment, and it is very, very slow. And people know that the Philodendron gigas can be quite slow. But I have heard from a lot of people going, you know what, you've had it for a few years, the leaves should be a bit bigger by this point. So the first thing that I want to say is kind of what do you do in terms of the care for it? I know from what people have said that this is maybe a plant that desperately needs moss pole, basically. So I'm aware of that, and I will be trying a moss pole with this. It's just, I've got a never-ending list of things that I need to potentially try on moss poles, and it just takes a while for me to kind of create the moss poles because a lot of things going on. But so far I've been growing it in semi-hydro, and it seems to be doing okay. It hasn't thrown a hissy fit, it's still growing. It's not growing particularly larger, but it is growing. It is still slow. Is there anything that you do in your care that means that this plant maybe isn't so slow? So I'll give you a benchmark on this. Maybe a new leaf every 3 months if I'm lucky. And that's including the growing season. I think in the winter time pretty much it stops to do very little. I do have it in a reservoir for most of the year, but it seems to have never really thrown a hissy fit. It's been in kind of semi-hydro mix kind of situation for at least 2 years now, so it seems to be okay. But if you do turn around and tell me, you know what, it will do a lot better for you in soil, I will transition that over to soil. In terms of pests, so far I've not found too many struggles with this plant, but if you know something that could potentially help other people, do let us know down below in the comments. And also, do you fertilize this often? Because this is a plant that doesn't grow particularly fast. I fertilize it the same way that I would fertilize all my other plants, so kind of weekly. But maybe I'm over-fertilizing. I've never seen any issue with kind of over-fertilization within the plant, but yeah, let me know down below. Now the next one I have got here to show you, it is doing a bit better, so I think I may have cracked it, but I am still reaching out to see if anybody's got any further advice for me. So this is my Philodendron Mami. I think it is a true mamei and not a hybrid, because I know sometimes with a lot of the mameis they are hybrids. This one grew like rubbish for me. I tried growing it as a crawler. Everybody was just like, no, it is a climber. So I then gave it janky support sticks, and it really didn't like its life too much. As you might be able to see, because I had 2 different growth points and I couldn't kind of attach them onto the same moss pole. This is the jankiest of moss poles. Look, it's a V basically of moss poles. So there's 2 moss poles, there's 2 growing points. Each one is on its own moss pole. It seems to be at its happiest now that I have given this a moss pole. So to me, that might suggest that this plant is what some people have kind of mentioned as obligate climbers. They desperately need something to climb onto, otherwise they are truly not happy. I might be wrong. You might turn around and say, you know what, I've been growing it differently. I don't know why yours is doing weird kooky things. That's fine. Let us all know in the comments down below. But this seems to be doing better. It is a mealybug magnet. I don't think I've had any other pests on this. I'm trying to think if I've maybe ever had spider mites. The silveriness on mine isn't particularly strong, so a question that I would have there is, do you do anything to yours to make sure that the silveriness is stronger? I'm growing this in bright indirect light. It literally is just behind a curtain in one of my brightest windows, net curtain, so it does okay. This one is in soil. I'd found that this is one of the plants that really didn't like semi-hydro. I tried it in semi-hydro, but I was also still trying to grow it as a crawler at that point and not a climber, so maybe it wasn't the semi-hydro that was the issue, but it was other things. Again, let me know if you're growing this as a climber in semi-hydro and it's doing well for you. Let us all know, because maybe the climbing was the issue that I was missing, basically. And I will say that since I have put it, and these are my kind of the way that I make my moss balls. Again, I've done a little video and I'll kind of link it at the top there. And it's doing very, very, very well at the moment. But I'm still kind of reaching out to see, you know what, could I do better? Like, is yours absolutely huge? I know I've got a couple of followers that have got massive versions of this plant. And hopefully some of them might be watching this video and they can go this and this and this and this and this and do these things and this plant will be fine. But yeah, and you can see there's been some of the oldest leaves, they're not looking their happiest, but this plant wasn't happy for a very long period of time. Like literally, the leaves I was getting was probably about this size for about 3 years, 2-3 years. And I almost gave up on this plant entirely. I was kind of sitting there going, you know what, this is going to be the last ditch attempt. I'm going to give you a moss pole, and if you don't grow for me, that's done. I'm not kind of spending any more of my time trying to make you happy. But it seems like it's been working. But let me know if what you do with your Philodendron Mami is different than what I've been doing with mine. Can you tell that this plant needs desperate help? I mean, yes, let's get rid of that yellow leaf because it's not really serving a purpose at the moment. But for the eagle-eyed amongst you, and I think I may have mentioned this in my this or that Anthurium video, I did a two-parter. Basically, I'll kind of link part one? Yeah, part one at the top, and I'll make sure that I'll put a link on the part one on the description so you can find part two as well. But yeah, this Philodendron, Sunday is not a good day for me. This is Anthurium lutheri. Doesn't this look like the most pathetic thing in the world? So, let me tell you what I have been doing with this plant, and you can maybe tell me, you're doing everything wrong, mine grows really well, these are all the things that I do. So, it is in a semi-hydro mix. It generally gets a water reservoir because I found that it's quite thirsty. It's interesting because you might be able to see, so that is the growing tip. There's a growth point there, there's a growth point there, there's another growth point there, there's another one down here. Like, this plant grows like no other Anthurium that I have ever seen. And by the way, I've done nothing to encourage these growth points, basically. And I think even when I got it, I got a lot of these weird growth points that were coming off existing parts of the stem, and maybe something happening at the top, but not always, basically. So, first thing is you might be able to see, I've got this on a janky support stick. This whole thing is just a bit... it's janky generally, basically. And I do want to give this a fighting chance this year to potentially show me what it can do. So, questions here if you do own this, especially if you've got this on a moss pole, because one of the things I'm thinking is I will finally give this a moss pole and see how it will grow, because, and again I'll bring it in a bit closer, you might be able to see, hopefully right there where my fingers are, that there are some substantial kind of thick and kind of large and in charge aerial roots. So, and I do think, considering how tall this gets, that it does probably need something to attach to. Question here now. Based on every little growth point that I was telling you, and the problem is these growth points are growing in every single direction. My worry is, say I put a moss pole here, will one of those growth points, will I lose some of those growth points because they will go into the moss, or will the plant actually figure out that, no, I'm attached to something, so I will only put growth points out on the other side. And by growth points, I mean kind of leaf growth points rather than aerial roots going into the moss pole. So that is the question. Second question that I have is, yes, I've been growing this in semi-hydro, and some of my Anthuriums I have now started to transition into Soil Ninja's Anthurium soil mix. And this might be one that I might do the same to. I think when I got this plant, and if I can find any pictures or videos of when I first got this from the Ecuagenera order, I think this had relatively thinner roots. And what I am finding now with some of my Anthuriums that have got thinner roots, don't think kind of the Terrafolium or even Crystallinum, you know, the ones that have got the really thick roots that are almost like Phalaenopsis roots. Some of these ones that have got thinner roots, I think, and again, based on, I've started to transition some of them into Anthurium soil mixes, I think they do better in soil, because there was a point when everybody, and myself included, was going, if you're going to grow Anthuriums in anything, grow it in semi-hydro. Yes, I will edit my comment now from back then and say, as long as the roots are thick, it will do great in a semi-hydro mix. If the roots are on the thinner side, I would still say maybe try something like a soil mix. Also, a little side note is all of my Anthuriums go into a coarse, so large semi-hydro mix, not in the very small, tiny kind of semi-hydro mix that you might get with pond, but I think even with those, even some of my Anthuriums with the smaller roots that were in smaller semi-hydro mixes, I think even they struggled basically. So, but the soil seems to be doing better for me. Again, it needs to be very airy. So yeah, question on this is moss pole, yes or no? Does it need it? Also soil, yes or no? And anything else that you can tell me, because this is the jankiest Anthurium that I own. I mean, this is just beyond pathetic at this point. And I am very close to giving up on this plant, but I do want to see if this year I can keep it happy and not doing all the things. Like I will say, for a fact, this plant, for however small it is, it is a spider mite magnet. Think levels of collocation alocasia and multiply it several times, basically. Again, based on my experience. And I'm quite impressed that it's actually growing a little growth point there. So, but yes, and the interesting thing was when I first got this from Ecuagenera and I'd kind of originally set it up, it was very happy in the summer and it was constantly throwing out growth and it was constantly getting spider mites and I was constantly dealing with spider mites. So I want to try something different this year. The people that have been here for a while might know the plant that I'm going to ask for help for in just a second, and it is an Alocasia, and you have seen it, and it's looking the most pathetic that it has ever looked before, and I think it's kind of like nigh on the like cliff edge of death at this point. I might replace this because I do love this plant, and I've owned it for a long period of time. Some people have said maybe you've got a bum one because everybody else finds this really, really easy to grow, but one leaf club for the Alocasia dragon scale, and this is the green Alocasia dragon scale. I have had good successes with the silver or the grey Alocasia dragon scale, and I was growing this in semi-hydro for a while because people were just like, it's in semi-hydro, it will do so much better. I have since moved it into soil and given it a clear pot, and I am seeing a lot more root growth, but yeah, it is one that is finally putting out a new growth point. I've got a new growth point that is starting there, this leaf, but actually let me show you the biggest issue that I've always had with this plant, and hopefully that will focus. Can you see the level of edema? Can you see these succulent leaves? They'll get that kind of watery burst cells, and then you get that kind of yellowing that happens in the front of the leaf. Question now, I didn't have this with a silver one, so I don't know. So, and the roots are always looking quite healthy. Every time when I first got this, I was really trying to troubleshoot it and go, why is it doing that? Like, I knew that the watering was the issue with this plant because I've never had another Alocasia get edema quite to the level that this one does. So question, have you ever had the same problem? Were you ever able to fix the problem? If so, how? Because I tried semi-hydro, it didn't particularly solve the problem because I'm just like, maybe the problem is it's drying out too much and then I'm watering it and then it's flooding the cells and it's bursting the cells. And then I tried having it consistently moist. I then tried having it where it dries out and then I kind of flush everything. I tried giving this a water reservoir when it was in semi-hydro. I tried it without a water reservoir. I tried it in bright light. I've tried it in bright indirect light. I've tried it in medium light. None of these things have helped. So please, 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 if you've got any advice on keeping some of these happy, please let me know. Now, the thing that I will hasten to say to this, I know some people, because this is a lot easier to find now than when I got it probably 5 or 6 years ago at this point. And mine was 5-6 leaves maybe, and it was relatively small compared to the gigantic size that you can get some of these things now. Does anybody have a smaller version of a dragon scale that can give me that advice? Because the problem is a lot of the times when I've got some advice on the dragon scale is people that got very, very large established specimens and they bought it that way and they were just like, but what you're doing is working for us. And to say, yeah, but it's established. So I think that might be the difference there. So if anybody does have this, and I mean, even if you don't, and even if you've got one of the established ones, tell me what you're doing. Maybe I'll figure out what I'm doing wrong. Let me know the soil mix. I mean, mine is, I think I'm actually giving it an Anthurium soil mix because I know from a lot of the Alocasias that this one is one that I think likes to dry out a bit, basically. Not go bone dry, but likes to dry out a bit. And it's interesting because I gave this plant to, or the silvery one, to somebody that I know recently, and they were kind of, and I kind of said, I'm just like, don't water it until it's dry. And then I went there like almost a month later and it was like nothing. It basically, the plant had not entirely died. The corm was still okay. Nothing had rotted or anything like that, but it was entirely dead. And the person was just like, but you told me not to water it. And I'm just like, it's not a cactus. It does need some water. It just needs to not be as a frequent water because you might get quite quick root rot, I find, with the dragon scaly type of Alocasias. But these have been my experience with these plants. Obviously, as I said, the silver one has always done really well. I grew my silver one to a massive size at some point. It's no longer in my collection because it wasn't bringing me as much joy. I've always preferred the greener one more, and I want to keep this one if possible. But I'm also considering if this one dies, if you all turn around and say, you know, you've got just a dud plant, maybe just repurchase, I'm happy to do that. But I'd like to hear your opinions on this, basically. But yeah, this is my very, very pathetic Alocasia dragon scale. Okay, so these are the plants that I'm struggling with at the moment. And you know me, I like to be transparent with these things. So everybody's just like, how could you be asking for advice? You know all of these things. We don't all know everything, if that makes sense. Like even me, who's grown this collection for so long, still struggle with quite a few plants, basically. So you are not alone if you struggle with certain plants. There are also certain plants that I'm not bringing up here because they are no longer in my care because I've given up on trying to figure out what I was doing wrong with them. And I'm just like, you are not bringing me any joy. I am just assuming that I cannot grow you and that's fine. Go away and I'll find something else to focus my time on. I've got enough things to be focusing on. But, and that's completely fine. And this also, little side comment before I let you go. This is also why a lot of people that I know on some of my videos are just like, everybody's always showing philodendrons, monsteras, anthuriums, or syngoniums, a lot of the aroids, but nobody focuses on other things. And I will be doing a video on kind of preferences and when you get good at a certain kind of genre of plants, it's a lot easier to just continue with that one. And I think we've all kind of fallen into the same kind of category with that one, just purely because a lot of the times they're a lot more available than some of the more kooky or more kind of the one-off kind of genres or species that might be beautiful, but you're not going to have, I don't know, you're not going to have 17 different formats of, or 17 different species of a Polyscia or an aralia in your collection. Does that make sense? You might do, and that's completely fine, and everybody has their, the point I'm trying to make is everybody has their genre that they are comfortable with, and eventually when you get a big enough collection, it just makes it a bit easier when you're just like, I've got quite a few philodendrons, I can grow them well. I've got quite a few anthuriums, I can grow them well. It's a no-brainer for me when I see a philodendron or an anthurium to just go, yes, bring it in, whatever that price might be. I've got enough years of experience with mine that I should be able to, you know, kind of get it to a point where it's happy, rather than me picking up something like this, which is more scary because it's just like, it's a plant that I do not own, I have never owned. I kind of know what I'm doing with some of my other plants, but this might be entirely different. It might want other things. So That's the reality of this video, and I think it's a nice one for you all to get involved, kind of like flip the tables a bit, because as I said, people ask me questions, I'm asking you to now help me if you don't mind, basically. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed, hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, bye.